Hello and welcome to Lesson 5 of Coding with Sahana. First, we will complete last week's challenge of the week. Next, we will learn about comparison statements. Finally, we will do a practice problem on programmers. So now let's start to solve our challenge problem from last week. So the problem asks that the program asks for the user's name, wants them to say, "Hi, nice to meet you," asks for their age, and says in 5 years they will be X years old, and prints out a list in the form of array of counting the different numbers up until that new age. So to do that, first I created a variable that I called name for easy reference, and I set it equal to the answer that the user responds with in response to the question, "What is your name?" And I used the input function to ask that question. Next, I used that name variable to print out, "Hi, name, nice to meet you," using a print statement. Next, I used another variable that I created and called age to set equal to the user's age that they input. So I used the input function to gather that information, and knowing that all inputs would be in the form of a string, I converted my string value of age into an integer by using the int or int function. Next, to find out how old the person would be in 5 years, no matter the given age, I created another variable that I called new age. New age I set equal to age plus 5, which will give us the value of their age after 5 years. And following that, I created a print statement. In 5 years, you will be blank, new age, years old. Next, I printed out "It's easy to count that high," as given in the assignment description. And finally, I created a print statement to print out a list with the range counting starting from 1 all the way up to new age plus 1. Even though I only want the program to count up until new age, we have to include this plus 1, given the fact that in Python, range always ends one less than your final number. So this uses syntax number 2, with our start value being 1 and our end value being new age plus 1, that value. So now when I run my code, I'm prompted in my shell, "What is your name?" And so in my shell, I can respond with Sahana, for example. "Hi Sahana, nice to meet you. What is your age?" is the response I'm prompted with, which is correct. Under that, I will include my age, and it correctly prints out, "In 5 years, you will be 21 years old. It's easy to count that high," followed with a list starting from 1 all the way up to 21. And this is one way of attempting this assignment. I'm sure there are many other ways of reaching the same end goal through different varieties of code. However, this is one simple way that you could efficiently ask the user for their name and their age. So first, let's look at Boolean variables. Boolean variables only have two possible values, true or false. These true or false values allow the computer program to make choices, depending on if a certain condition is met or not. Basically, if the condition is met, the program will carry out a set of commands. But if it is not met, the program will carry out a different set of commands. These condition statements are used to determine the flow of executed commands in the program are called control flow statements, and they are usually made up of comparison and Boolean operators. This is a chart of different comparison operators used in Python. Some of the most common ones are double equals, b, and the greater or less than symbols. In addition to comparison operators, there are also Boolean operators, which are not, and or. Of the three, not has the highest priority when there's a list of Boolean operators in one conditional statement. This is like your order of operations to conditional statements. In this first example, we can see that given A is 3 and B is 4, print whether A is less than B. Since 3 is less than 4, our first output is true. However, in the second example, since 3 is not greater than 5, the output is false. In the second image, we can see how if at least one of the conditions in the parentheses with AND is not met, the program will always output false. In the final image, we can see that the NOT gate prints out the opposite of the result of the condition, and how we can use the IN gate to search for characters within a string and print out true or false. Now, let's look at control flow statements. Control flow statements are crucial to your understanding of programming, especially in coding languages like Python and C. To build upon a conditional statement, control flow statements allow us to instruct the program to do a set of tasks if the condition results in true or false. The three control flow statements in Python are if, else, and elif. In the first example, given that A is 24, lines 2 and 3 state that if A is greater than 20, then print out your number is greater than 20. Since 24 is greater than 20, the output prints out the following. As you can see in the next image, if we change the value of A to a value that is less than 20, the program does not output anything. However, we can modify this. The next type of control flow statement is else. Below my if statement, I coded else, colon, and the statement I want to print out. So, the control flow logic first checks if the value of A is greater than 20, and if so, it prints out a specific statement. However, if the value of A is not greater than 20, it prints out a different statement. In the first two images, we can see how depending on the value of A, the output varies. In the third image, notice how there is a hashtag symbol before the variable statement defining the value of A. The hashtag is used to create comment statements or notes for the coder that are eventually ignored by the program. Comment statements can help the coder keep track of what their lines of code mean. However, it is not good to comment out needed code because the program will ignore it. In this case, since the first line is commented out, the program does not comprehend the value of A, so it cannot process it through the control flow statement. Elif statements are useful when there is more than one condition being tested out in the control flow branch. The set of if and else check a binary condition. Yes, the condition, or no, the condition is not met. Elif is useful when we want the program to check if a condition is met, if not another, and so on. And if none of the conditions are met, then do this, which is our else gate. In this case, we can use the input function to gather the name of the user, and we store it in the variable we call name. If the name is less than or equal to 3 characters, then the program should print out one statement. If not, if the name is between 3 and 10 characters, then the program should print out a different statement. If the name does not meet these two conditions, the program should print out a different statement. As you can see, the shell prints out the correct statement based on the number of characters in our variable name. Although uncommon, it is possible to avoid using else and elif and only using if statements. However, this practice is not efficient as using if statements multiple times for the same task can result in inefficiency of the program and can result in longer runtime. Finally, let's go over compound conditional statements. In this example, on line 5, we have two conditions for the value of our variable num. Num is put between the less than and greater than statements to show the domain of num, and this notation is perfectly acceptable in Python. In contrast, on line 7, we have two conditions for the value of our variable num. But in this case, instead of putting num between the symbols, we used an AND gate to require both conditions to result in true. Both notations, the one shows in line 5 and the one in line 7, are perfectly acceptable in Python. However, in many other coding languages, the first compound condition statement will not be accepted. However, in Python, it is accepted. Personally, I make it a habit to use notation number 2, and you should too. Given the following, now let's look at a problem with comparison statements. Okay, so now let's do our practice for lesson 5. So our assignment is determine whether a word is a palindrome. So just by the title, we can tell that our answer will have to be a binary statement. Yes, the word is a palindrome, or no, the word is not a palindrome. So knowing that, we know that we're going to have to use control flow statements, if, elif, else, etc. Okay, so before we get started with our code, let's define some basic things. So what is a palindrome? For those who don't know, a palindrome is a word that remains the same even after reversing the order of the letters. So one example is race car. Even when we start from the last letter and go back to the first letter, our word remains the same, meaning that race car is a palindrome. Okay, so now let's get started with creating a program. So I'm going to name a variable for the word that the user would put in. I'm going to call it word, and I'm going to set it equal to the input using the input function of give me a word \n so that the user would put it on the next line. Next, I would create another variable to represent the reverse of word. So I'm going to call it rev for reverse equals word bracket colon colon -1. So if you can recall, strings are also lists, meaning that each character in our string can represent each index in a list. From our list video, we also looked at how bracket colon colon -1 is the keyboard shortcut in Python to reverse the ordering of a list. So I'm going to use the bracket colon colon -1 on our word to reverse the order. And I'm also going to do the Python method .lower. So that way we can compare a word with all lowercase letters to another word with all lowercase letters. Okay, given this, now let's get started with our control flow statements. So I'm going to do if word dot lower, so we can compare two dot lowers, is equal, double equals, because we're not assigning a variable, we're comparing, equals rev. Rev is already applied to dot lower, so we don't have to repeat the dot lower part. So if word dot lower is equal to the reverse, then print word dot capitalize, which will return it back to its normal state, comma, and then in quotes is a palindrome. Similarly, we can say, okay, if word dot lower is not equal to reverse, so else, print word dot capitalize is not a palindrome. Let's print this out and check to make sure that our code is working as per what we want it to do. So I'm going to press run, give me a word. Let's first start out with a word that we know is a palindrome. So in this case, let's start off with race car. As you can see, our code correctly prints out race car is a palindrome. Perfect. So now let's try it out with a word that we know is not a palindrome. So that way we can check the else part of the program and check to make sure that part is working correctly. So I will put in just a simple word that I know is not a palindrome, like tea. As you can see, our program also prints out that tea is not a palindrome. This is one way of doing this assignment, but as you all know, coding is similar to math in the sense that one program can be done in many, many different ways. So, perfect. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and click on the bell icon for notifications on my next video.